If you try to write with budgetary constraints, you just won't write. You've got to imagine. And I mean, I think that if somebody said, look, you know, there's always a process. And it's great because you sometimes, you know, you're talking about something with people. And in the past, when I've done shows, they've sort of said, oh, this can be really lavish. Let's make this a really, really lavish, incredible, sumptuous feast. And I go, yeah, all right, then I will. So I go away and write this incredibly lavish, sumptuous feast. And then we just sort of about 6 weeks later, somebody rings up and says, you know that incredibly lavish, sumptuous feast? And I go, yeah. They say, could it just be like a handful of people? And you know, when I said it's got to be like a banquet, could it be basically like a cupboard under the stairs? But you're aware of that. Things like this always happen in TV. Things like that always happen in film. There's a great big, you know, the huge, you know, this is going to be amazing. And then they come sweeping across the horizon. You go, actually, we just can't film that. But you start off not thinking about anything like that, because further down the line, you will, and you just bring the same inventiveness to solve the problem, so that if you run out of money, you just find a different way to write that scene so it is in a cupboard under the stairs. So you meet these people and you're in the read-through and everybody is kind of very sort of relaxed and reading through, and then you see them in their costumes and it absolutely takes you aback and you go, Christ, here you are, because now you are occupying this space which didn't exist until I sat down at my keyboard and went interior and planned the whole thing out. And that wouldn't have existed without Agatha Christie going, I've got an idea, locking herself in a room. And do you know what I mean? There's an incredible thing where none of this would happen were it not for lunatics like myself and other writers and Tom Stoppard having a blank page and going, that's the first word. It's sort of mental when you think about it. No wonder we're all so bloody insane. Broken human beings. I very much grew up watching TV. That was my sort of film, that was my theatre. Because when I was little, we weren't taken to the theatre a lot. You know, my parents are very keen on theatre, but it costs a lot of money and it's difficult to take a big family to the theatre. Same with the cinema. We all love films, but it cost a lot of money to take a big family to the cinema. So I grew up watching TV. I grew up with this, and it was in black and white, and it was the clangers, and then it was this, and then you end up thinking this extraordinary medium that sits in the corner of the room, and some people are incredibly snobby about it, and some people are proper passionate devotees, and I absolutely love it because it speaks to people in this incredible way. And you know, so, you know, people can go like, oh my God, the television is so bloody awful on, you know, if you know, X Factor or whatever, or Strictly Come Dancing or Bake Off. But there's something incredibly kind of unifying about it. And I really, really love it as a medium, and I find it really exciting. And I was always really determined to try and model myself on the people who didn't say, well, I write for TV as though it was you know, it pays the mortgage, but to actually define the medium. And I remember watching Dennis Potter being interviewed. I'm a huge fan of Dennis Potter, I'm a huge fan. And my dad was from the same, you know, from that area of sort of Forest of Dean, Gloucester area, and could actually do the same accent, that really, really dark, thick accent. But when you watch The Singing Detective and thought, this is extraordinary. And I watched his interview where he said, I don't write for television, I write television. And thinking, that's the ambition. That is the ambition. You define, you know, that to be part of something that loves this medium so much because you know what it can do. And similarly, I love writing for radio as well, because that's a really intense, private feeling, you know, when you're listening to a radio play and it's so good you stop moving because you don't want anything to distract from this word that's in your ear. TV's different. TV feels more shared, more, you know, it's sort of, the light encompasses the room. So, yeah, I love it. And same with EastEnders, because I was on EastEnders for years, and knowing that show, which some people are really dismissive about, and I absolutely am, I passionately adore it. That show can be such a huge talking point. And the challenge is, you know, it's on in the background. People are busy. It's 7:30 in the evening. They've got loads to do. Your challenge, because that's your audience, is to make them go, hang on a minute, what did they just say? And to become really involved, because for half an hour, you have this extraordinary audience. For half an hour, you have this extraordinary set. You have these extraordinary actors. You have this extraordinary sense of legacy. Tell a story. And that, you know, even just talking about it makes the hairs on my arm stand up. I think that there is nothing like the approaching deadline to make you disciplined. And there's a really funny cartoon which it sort of goes around online amongst sort of writers' forums and things like that, and it's called The Creative Process. And it's basically like this long line, and it's just like, yeah, whatever, yeah, in time, okay, oh, look, Netflix, oh, no, maybe pub, no, do this. And then it gets this tiny little bit at the end, and it goes, wall-eyed panic, everything gets done, you know. And it's, you know, but even then, when there's this kind of, you know, process whereby I'm just sort of walking the dog or sort of staring into space, it's what I call filling up with it all, filling up with it until you get to the point where you go, right, now it can go. Now I can start, because I feel really confident in all the characters inside here. Do realise that I sound vaguely psychotic, but in terms of natural discipline, I think saying to people, you must write XYZ amount of words every day can kind of be a bit odd. Sometimes they might just be terrible words and you get really depressed, but you should try and do something every day. And I do think that sometimes I'm really undisciplined, and there are days when I just think, oh, sod this, I'm going to watch 8 episodes of Narcos back to back. And then other days where I will sit there for 50 hours and I'll sit there and write, and I won't get up until it's finished. And you really learn that from working in continuing dramas like EastEnders. Nobody cares about waiting for your muse. We're on, get going, start grafting. Well, this is a really interesting thing, as I said before. I mean, she's this extraordinary powerhouse. This extraordinary, the amount of work is absolutely phenomenal. And like I said, I didn't really know her work. I thought I knew Agatha Christie, but when I read And Then There Were None, I realised that I didn't know her at all. And there was an extraordinary mind at work, a very clever, dark, tough mind. And I think that rather than thinking of Miss Marple and English Villages, and there's a camp wit and there's a delight and there's a bounce, actually, I wonder if it's time to sort of like really reappraise perhaps in a larger literary tradition, and to actually think about And Then There Were None as being a really modernist novel. Yes, it's contained within a plot, and it's a really ludic plot, it's a game, but actually within it there are some really, really tough questions. This is really right off the cuff, but like years ago, sort of early 90s, I was in Edinburgh, pretending to be an actor, and there was this extraordinary production of 3 Greek tragedies: Medea, Trojan Women, and the Electra, the last part of the Oresteia. And it was brilliant. It was done by this huge Romanian theatre company. Now, I know this is digressive, but we will get to the point. And the first one, and none of it was in English, it was in Romanian, it was in bits of Greek, it was bits of Latin. First one was Medea, darkness apart from flaming torches, and promenade, so you could move around. The second one, Women of Troy, part lit, part torches, and semi-promenade, so you could move around, but it was more restricted. And when you got to the final part, which is Electra, which is where everything in the Oresteia comes down, which is where blood and judgment, and it is just horrific. We were all pinned in our seats and we couldn't move. And it was just pure white light that was so blinding that you went like this. There was no shadow, there was nowhere to hide, there was no equivocation. All it was vengeance and death because you have wronged the gods. And it really stayed with me. And I think the reason it stayed with me is because Ceausescu had just fallen, and you'd had those incredible scenes of, the Romanian people turning on their dictator. And then his trial, this broken old man with his wife screaming at him, "Don't let them talk to you like that, you're an academic." And then he's shot. And those other scenes of the chair on its side on the blood. So watching this, it felt like a bloodletting. It felt like a bloodletting for Romania against dictatorship, but it also felt like this incredible thing which was about the power of the Greek tragedy. And when I read "And Then There Were None," I thought, this is Aeschylus. There is nowhere to hide. No help is coming. You have done wrong, and here is your judgment. And it is like the Electra, the Romanian Electra, like being in the absolute, unblinking, remorseless, vengeful eye of God. Here it comes, and no one is going to save you. And I felt that God, right, if to do this, I am going to arrogantly, everyone's going to take the mickey out of me for saying this, but it feels like there is a really strong tradition from that sense of judgment is coming to Agatha Christie, to this book. And so when I was writing it, I kept thinking of that Electra where there was no shadow, where there was nowhere to hide, and there was no equivocation. You couldn't explain the things you'd done. You couldn't reason away your guilt. It is utterly forensic and utterly brutal. And that's what I thought, I'm going to bring all that to this. So one day, if I was a big Ponzi PhD student, I'd be doing Aeschylus and Agatha. I felt very strongly, there was quite a lot of, I went in to sort of pitch to Matthew Pritchard, who is Agatha Christie's grandson, and to Hilary Strong, who is the head of Agatha Christie Limited, my vision, as it were. I know that sounds incredibly Ponzi, but that's what they call it. And I felt very, very strongly that because I'd never read any Agatha Christie before, and I've got friends who are mad keen devotees and have read everything, and they think I'm a complete heretic and want to throw stones at me. But what really shocked me is you think you know Agatha Christie. You think you know it because you're aware of Poirot, you're aware of Marple in it, you're aware of all those great kind of film versions of Peter Ustinov as Poirot and the great stars of, the 70s and 80s doing Death on the Nile, and they're really good fun, and there's a campery to them. So I thought I knew what Agatha Christie was. And Then There Were None completely blew me out of the water. So when I went in and I said what I would like to do with the novel, I was very clear that I wanted it to be set at the absolute time in which she'd written it, and she wrote it in 1939. And that really struck me because it felt like that it was a book about its times without being about its times. It is the genre of like murder, mystery and everything else, but it absolutely redefines it and transcends it both at the same time. And I felt very strongly that it's 1939. She wrote it in 1939, it was published in 1939. And here are these 10 people on an island at the end of the world. In the summer of 1939, we are a couple of weeks away from the Second World War. And this is all about, they're all products, all of these people, they're all products of the First World War, if you like. And here they are with all the things that they've done, and the end of their world is arriving. No one's going to come and save them. No idiosyncratic little Belgian detective. No sharp-eyed English spinster. No one is going to come and save the day. They are alone with judgment for the things that they've done. And it absolutely felt like a book about its time, a book about being at this point in the 20th century. And I was incredibly sort of shocked by its brutality and felt that when I came to adapt it, it would absolutely be set in that place. It would absolutely be an island so that you can't see the mainland. You'd be absolutely alone, because I think that's what she's written a book about it, that you're alone with the things you've done and judgment is coming. And it's going to be brutal because they are in 1939, and in 2 weeks' time, the Second World War II will be declared. And it will be brutal. That's what I kind of went in with.